Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Laurent De Grauwe, who is the Senior Director of Global Field Go-to-Market and Programs at one of the biggest names in the game at Microsoft. He's results-driven and been a sales and marketing executive for 20 years with successful go-to-market strategies for accelerating revenue growth, increasing market share, and transforming industries. Laurent, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm glad to be here.
I think if I had to grade myself on the pronunciation of your name, I think I'd give myself maybe like a B minus. Is that fair? Did I do okay, or how did I do it?
Well, you actually did well. Like I'm used to hearing my name in very different things. So
well, hey man, appreciate you coming on, and had an awesome opportunity to sit down and talk with you last week, get to know you a little bit, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I think you have a very interesting background, and most of the time I usually have like SaaS CEOs on the show, but love what you're doing and how you're kind of looking at products, especially at Microsoft holistically from a solution perspective, because we're getting carpet bombed with products every day in terms of AI tools and other things. So thought it'd be great to have you on the show, man. So but before we do kind of get into it, we'd just love to hear a little bit about your background, and can you share it with you, the listeners, so that they have some context about who you are and kind of how you got into the role that you're at right now.
Yeah, no, great. So like you said, I've been about 20 years in the tech sector, roughly 10 years in marketing, 10 years in sales. I actually started in marketing, working for HP. And then I moved into sales roles, first at a startup. Then after a few years, I was recruited by Microsoft, started in channel sales roles. So I was mostly kind of building out kind of new businesses. It was the early days of cloud. And so there I was working with recruiting partners, building plans with them, and then co-selling so that we could grow our annual recurring revenue. And so I was able to kind of achieve good results where we were less than 3 million on a yearly basis to over 10 million in less than 3 years. From there, I kind of went into...
Stop that real quick. Did you say 3 million to 210 million in 3 years?
No. You just 10 million.
Okay.
Plus 10
that's
million.
That's still very good. I thought you said 3 million to 210 million in 3 years. I'm like, dude, we never talked about this. This is pretty amazing. But still, 3 million to 10 million in 3 years is still really good. Keep going, man. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. No. And otherwise, if it would have been 200 million, we would have had to do a podcast that would take an hour or two, I think. But just 10, a little more over 10 million. Then I moved into solution sales. So I was selling core infrastructure solutions for Microsoft. So think about kind of management tools, security, identity, virtualization was big at that time. And from there, I went into sales management roles, managing the full kind of data platform. It was also the moment where we launched Azure. And so I did the first couple of deals for our Azure cloud. And then after about 7.5 years or so in the Belgian and Luxembourg subsidiary for Microsoft, I moved with my family to the United States to work for the headquarters. I moved back into marketing, so leading field marketing disciplines, first for Internet of Things and advanced analytics. That was before AI became a thing. And for the last 5 years, I've been leading the go-to-market for business applications. So that is CRM applications, ERP applications, as well as some low-code platforms that we have at Microsoft.
Love that. So,
and maybe just to add, maybe this is kind of where then the SaaS founders or whatever. So in the last 3-4 years, I've been advising a few startups. I always say that's my way for staying very close to the action and the reality and the challenges of kind of new businesses and not just kind of work on, let's say, established or bigger businesses at Microsoft.
Well, that's great, man. And you have a great treasure trove to pull from in terms of ideas and information from that. So I guess like go to market. I mean, go to market's loosely thrown around in a lot of different ways and areas in terms of a definition. I guess, like, how do you define go to market, and then what do you see as the single biggest mistake that companies are making today with their go to market?
Yeah. Well, so for me, it's all about one. You have a product or you have a solution. What's the best route to market? So, what are the different channels that you are going to engage? What's your pricing strategy and your business model? And then it's really thinking about your sales and marketing strategy on how you can basically engage your customers, your prospects in a meaningful way with a strong value proposition, with a personalized customer journey. So all of those things for me are part of a go-to-market. And to your point, at Microsoft, I think there are a lot of different teams that think they do go-to-market, or they will claim they do go-to-market, but instead they have like pieces of it. And even me, like I've also like certain pieces of it. It's a team sport when it comes down to go-to-market.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that. So, what do you think is the biggest mistake that people make when they're formulating or creating their go to market?
Well, I think the starting point. So a lot of companies, a lot of people start from the product, and I'm not entirely sure it's the right starting point. I think you need to start from the customer, the buyer persona, the user, and really identify what are their pain points, and are those pain points materially big enough that they want to change or that they want to solve it. And do you have an idea of what if you would solve it, what the impact would be from a value perspective of that change? And then you can start to think about, okay, how can, for instance, technology or what can our product do in order to go solve that? I see too often that we start from the product, we have all those cool features, and then we start to think about, okay, where do we have a market fit? And can I kind of shape my value proposition in a way that it might resonate? And some will stop there. Some will challenge themselves and say, hey, we need to really be clear about value and the impact that we are going to achieve. But too often I see too many people leading with products and not enough leading with pain and with value.
Yeah, I mean, I made that mistake before, right? Like, it's an easy trap to fall into, because sometimes folks look at it as like, hey, what can I offer? What can I deliver? And then how does it fit in with what the market needs? But you're right. I mean, when I've taken a step back and looked at effectively, like, okay, what are the problems, and really, really focused on that, sometimes you get a completely different answer, or a lot of times you get a completely different answer of, what you need to create to solve that. And so I think that's very insightful, and that's a great feedback. And I could see that in so many areas where people make that mistake. So,
yeah, I think that's also one of the reasons that a lot of the startups are stuck in the product fit phase of a company, because they haven't really done enough of their homework. And so I think it's the companies that once they start to engage their customers, start to understand the customers better, start to tweak some of their use cases, maybe not entirely the tech, but the use cases, that's where you see the acceleration happening. And so, yeah, customer centricity, it's not just a buzzword, it's your starting point.
Well, so what would be your framework, right? If you were creating a startup today, in terms of getting enough feedback, like tactically, what would you do to sniff out that problem, make sure you understand it at a very deep level, and then create a product designed around that? Like, what would be your, like 3 to 5 step process that you would, or more steps if needed, to handle that?
Yeah. Well, so the first, I would just see, like, hey, what are the meaty problems out there that are impacting businesses today negatively, or if we would adapt it, we would be able to kind of impact them positively and significantly. So if do we have an idea of that? And then based off that is to kind of think about what could be a potential answer to that, and just go validate. Talk to your potential buyers. Go listen to what you know about the problem, but then try to get their perspectives on it. Stress test. That's one of my favorite words. I use it all the time at Microsoft as well. When you have an idea, go stress test it. Go talk about it with as many people as you can in a way, and you will see that you will reshape whatever you started into slightly differently based on the input and feedback that you're receiving. So when you have an idea about a problem and a potential solution, go stress test it with your potential buyers. And so once you have a good amount of feedback, that's where I think you want to kind of put it out there as kind of a first version. Like we tend to use that the minimum viable product. I know they're like, is really minimal. I think you want to kind of create a good experience from the get-go, but at least get it out and get feedback and refine as you go. And so the moment you have enough market input, that's where you can then start to think about what are the best routes to go and scale this. What are the best business models to put this in market? And that you should go ask it. Like, why do you come with your own price point? You might be too low because the problem is actually way bigger, and they are willing to pay a lot more. And so go ask them what they would pay for it, how big this problem really is. Would they prioritize it? Is this something that they would be willing to invest kind of their time on to drive a certain change? Once you get that clarity, you will be able to get rolling.
I think that's a great framework. In terms of like talking to people and getting direct feedback, what's like in terms of quantity, what's a number, like a minimum number you want to hit for that in terms of people you talk to? I've seen 30, you want to talk to at least 30 is kind of the recommended standard. What's your feedback on that?
Well, I think it depends on in the end, your target audience. And the more verticalized, niched you are, you can have with a few, it probably can be enough. I was working with a buyer persona agency, and their approach was basically they interview about 8 to 12. And they have noticed that there is not a lot of differences if you interview more people. So I think somewhere around 10 is really your minimum. But it depends. Like if you want to kind of address the entire world, you need to kind of at least categorize it based on segments. But if you say, hey, I'm gonna sell into, let's say, banking, and I want to kind of talk to a few banks and a few people within banks, I think that should be enough.
Okay. So I think that's great feedback. And so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about sales tools, right? Or tools in general. I think I've seen as many as like 13,000 new AI tools have been introduced this year alone, which I don't know if that number is accurate or it's a little overblown, but it wouldn't surprise me if it would be. And it kind of depends on what you constitute as a tool, right? So, so I guess with that, let's talk about specific applications for sales. Like, what do you think the biggest challenge in the space is now with sales tools and leveraging them and using them organizationally and for small companies and bigger companies enterprise wide?
Yeah, so like right now I'm actually, for one of the startups, I'm kind of exploring what it would take for us to start a direct sales channel. And we don't have any tools. Very simple. So I start to kind of look into how could we at least put something in place that is going to allow us to be very efficient from the get-go, because you want to be, especially if you start to do outbound outreach, you want to be efficient. And what I noticed is that you have either like bigger tools that have a lot of bells and whistles that you don't need, or you have those individual tools that will just do one little thing and you need a lot more. And so it's just hard to have something that will allow you to take the full step from, okay, I need to build a list. So I want to have data, because as a startup, I might not have customer data just yet. So I want to build my list. Then I want to build my sequence, and I want to have a sequence that is omni-channel and that I can automate at some extent. And I want to do personalization. So I want to make sure that each interaction, I can personalize it, but on the fly. That's where AI is now bringing so much efficiencies. And I want to have, as one of the steps, I need to have a dialer because I want to call them and maybe want to send some text messages as well. And then I want to make sure that I can kind of manage appointments, and I want to be able to manage them, my opportunities and so on. And so suddenly this thing becomes like pretty large. And what you see is that you have either, I think Outreach has a lot of those things, HubSpot has a lot of those things. But then you miss maybe this thing, and then yes, you have integrations, but it's just so complex, and very quickly you might have 4 or 5 tools that you are working with, and yes, you have maybe some Chrome extensions and all of that, but I don't know if it then makes you that more efficient if you have to jump from one tool or another, or you need to learn how to use one tool, and that's why I think there is opportunity to go back into the basics of what is it that you need to do, and can we provide kind of a single end-to-end tool that is going to be addressing that specific need of, let's say, a startup that is just starting with some outbound sales.
It makes a lot of sense. Any other big gaps?
What is your perspective there? Like what is your perspective there? How are you thinking about the tools?
Well, yeah, I think before we shift gears, I think, yeah, I can answer that definitely. I think that's true. I mean, there is a massive amount of tools out there, and you do have to jump to a lot of them. And the company's position things is like it's so easy to integrate and connect all of them, but it's not. You know, like even with tools like Zapier, right? You're just like, oh yeah, just use Zapier and connect it. Well, like you do it with tools, and you get like sometimes 15 different errors. That you follow the instructions when it says you do that, and it just doesn't connect. So I get what you're saying with that, and that's just a micro example of what you're talking about. But yeah, there's a lot of different ranges of tools out there to do different like point solutions, and so I think there's definitely challenges there. I think there's challenges for also understanding like the effectiveness of tools and the ROI of tools as well, and what people are really getting out of them, not just using them in task switching, but when you look at it more from a management perspective, there's that. And that's why it's interesting because it's looked at more from a cost perspective only as opposed to a utilization perspective or an outcome perspective. But there's a lot of companies now that basically do SaaS management, right? So you can understand like what tools are being used, how many users, are your contracts right size, but not really effectively, you know, from a manager's perspective. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. That's just kind of my take. And I don't know if that makes sense on your end or what your thoughts are.
It does. And I agree.
Yeah. So I think, you know, so let's shift off tools real quick because I want to make sure we hit this. I think there's something out there that a lot of people are missing. And I think that's because of the fact that most people are so focused, whether it's in sales or go to market, they're focused on sales and they're focused on marketing and they're focused on the product, but they forget about connecting authentically with people as humans. Right. And so, you know, what's happening now is like, there's more risk because we're in what someone classifies down market. Right. And so you have to have a higher level of trust to really execute and connect with them. So from your perspective, what's your framework for creating trust in the sales process?
Yeah, so I strongly believe that people buy from people they trust, and not necessarily like trust. And for me, trust comes. It's hard work to earn trust. It's not something you can claim. You will receive it if you put the hard work in it. And so it starts with combining or finding the right balance between building connection and basically showing your humanity, really being curious about you as a person, about you as part in your function, in your company, and basically do kind of your discovery so you really understand what's going on in their world. And at the same time, also kind of building your credibility. And that's where you need to bring value to them. And so as a subject matter expert, you have maybe a certain expertise, you want to bring that value to them. so that they not only see that you are interested in them as let's say as a company, as a customer, to really get to know them and understand them, but also in that engagement start to provide some value. And so I think when you find the right balance between building connection and building your credibility, then you start to earn trust. And when you have trust, that's only then you can start to kind of bringing them along into a change or a transformation journey. And then you can be their guide throughout their change, explaining why now, why should they change, and that's kind of where the whole value conversations comes to play, but also explaining them how, so that you have kind of a step-by-step process in order to get them there. And so you cannot go into kind of a change trajectory if you don't have that trust. And so finding a good way around connection and building credibility, I think, is key. And one of the key pieces that I love to kind of do as a salesperson is what I call give and get. So I remember one of my first sales conversations. Mm-hmm. I knew I had to qualify the opportunity. I had to ask a lot of questions, and I had my long list of questions to ask. And I went in and I just started to ask all the questions and taking notes. I was like an interviewer. Now, that's not of course you're doing discovery, but like there is no time for that. People don't want to kind of invest and just inform you without getting anything in return. So after a while, I started to understand, like, hey, if I'm not providing value to them, they're not going to give me necessarily all the real answers to some of the questions that I might have. And so things like, hey, I've been talking to a number of customers like you. And so the three things I'm constantly hearing is 1, 2, and 3. Which one is the most important to you? Or is there another one? And so by me giving already something, they will give me some input back. Or, hey, I was looking at your website, and I think your website looked really, really cool because I found a lot of information. I know those are your priorities, and you were talking about that you want to kind of create partnerships with your customers around sustainability. Awesome. But then I go look at your products, and I just see products. I don't see anything about innovation or the value you will bring to me as a customer. So I think there is an opportunity there. So what do you think about how you go to market or how you position yourself on your website? And then suddenly you start to kind of have a different type of conversation. So I'm a big fan of trying to build connection and to show genuinely interest into them while building your credibility. And that's where you bring in value, and doing that in a fashion that you do give and get throughout the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's such a great distinction, the whole give and get, because you want to turn it from an interrogation to a transformation, right? And you can't just interrogate someone and expect them to want to do business with you. But you could, if you get that fuel or that fire to basically provide value, if you don't have it on the front end before walking in that meeting, you could help them transform in the whole experience with you by just creating relevant context to what those questions provide. So I think that's a really strong point. Most people don't even ask good questions in the sales area, right? So I think you're taking it a couple steps further, right? Ask great questions that are relevant, do your homework, and then give them value in return for what they're giving. I think what you said too is so simple. It's so great. Is like the 3 biggest patterns I see with people in your space are X, Y, and Z. People always love to hear what their competitors are doing. You know what I mean? So I think you nailed it right there. Unfortunately, we're just about up on time. So where can people find you? Where can they find out more about what you're doing at Microsoft? And then we'll take it from there.
I think the easiest way is to hit me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive. So let's share my contact details there, and let's engage in a conversation.
Yeah, well, it was really good to have you on the show, Laurent, and I liked your perspective. You know, you have a very, very unique role in terms of the go-to-market side, where you're straddling sales and marketing and products. So very, very unique perspective. So it was awesome having you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
All right. And we will see you all on the next episode.